Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's review, we are taking a look at the Swarm from Discraft. So I do apologize, I'm a little bit late to the Swarm party, but here we go. Let's jump on in, taking a look at the profile. Now, overall, the Swarm has a very blunt nose, a fairly flat flight plate. However, in the very middle of the flight plate, where the injection point is, it does have a little bit of a bump to it. So even though it is flat, there is just a little bit of a bump in the middle of the flight plate. However, even with that little bump for forehand grips, this still feels amazing because the rest of the flight plate is still incredibly flat. And when it comes to the plastics, well, the Jawbreaker Z Flex is very flexible but still holds its shape, while the ESP is still soft and flexible, but as you can see, not nearly as flexible as the Jawbreaker Z Flex. For the flight numbers, the Swarm is a very beefy boy. Speed 5, glide 3, so very little glide, turn 0, and a fade of 4. At least number-wise, making the Swarm the most overstable true mid-range in Discraft's lineup. I say true mid-range because questionable the Zone OS, that is an approach putter disc, and some may argue that it is a mid-range. But the Swarm is classified as a mid-range, and as you can see from me trying to pathetically throw the Swarm, this thing is incredibly overstable. Now, you may have noticed there wasn't a hyzer throw so far, and that's because, it doesn't really matter. When I throw this thing flat, it is instantly starting to get onto that hyzer line and just hyzering out right away. I cannot get this thing to ride out flat for more than it feels like 15 or 20 feet as it leaves my hand. And even when I throw this with a bit of anhyzer, it wants to fight out of it right away. It does not want to hold that anhyzer line at all and then just fight out at the very end. No, as soon as I release it, it's like, nope, here we go. We're just going to try to hyzer out. So, I can't really get, this is not going to be a distance kind of mid-range. Even with an extreme exaggerated anhyzer angle, it fights out almost immediately. This is solely for touch approach shots. You are not going to use this for any kind of distance whatsoever. It's strictly for those shorter approach shots. Maybe if the wind is really up, this is an incredible wind fighter. If you live in an area with very heavy winds consistently, the Swarm may actually be for you, even as an amateur player. For myself, the Swarm is borderline not even useful at all, same as like the Zone OS, just because of how overstable it is. There are other discs on the market that can do what the Swarm does, but are a little bit more workable for my arm speed. But for bigger arms, you're really gonna like just how predictable the Swarm is. And since it has that low glide, the wind does not affect this at all, as it wants to get to the ground, is going to keep you close to the basket. Just overall, a great approach disc. Again, a little bit too much for AM arms, but it still will have its uses depending on your location. But for the most general players, I would not recommend the Swarm unless you do have a really fast arm or you live in those very windy areas. But if you are so inclined to give the Swarm a try, let's go ahead to the course and see how I would use it. This first hole is very straightforward. There's really no lines on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is very open, and you do have just a few trees you have to miss, but some pretty wide gaps. Just throw the Swarm either flat or a slight anhyzer and just kind of let it flex it around those trees, knowing that it's going to just dive bomb in towards the basket. This is very similar. You have wide open on the right-hand side, tight on the left. Just kind of the exact opposite of the other. Just throw it out flat to a slight anhyzer, let it fight out, and just dive bomb again into the basket. You're going to see the exact same thing here. Perfect for getting around tight corners. Just keep it on this steep hyzer line. It is not going to try to flip up and deviate at all. It is just going to hold that spiking hyzer the entire way. Now this is more for showing that the Swarm has other uses. It is incredibly straight when it comes to forehand rollers. I was expecting this to get a little bit of curl. No, it stays absolutely dead straight. So if you have just a straight fairway, by all means, use this as a forehand roller. It is actually going to be very good for those shots in the woods. And when it comes to the plastics, right now just comes in that Jawbreaker Z-Flex and ESP. But how does the ESP compare to the Jawbreaker Z-Flex? Is there really any major difference between the two? Like for say amateurs, is one more understable than the other? Yeah, no, they're both incredibly overstable. Besides just the flexibility and feel of the plastic, they're almost identical when it comes to the flight. Maybe, just maybe, the ESP is a smidge less stable, but overall they're both incredibly overstable discs. It's really just going to come down to which feels better for you. Now, there was some talk, how much different is the Swarm than the Buzzz OS? And as you can see, there is a drastic difference between the two. When thrown on a slight anhyzer on the release, the Swarm just basically autocorrects to straight and just dive bombs, versus the Buzzz OS, you get a good amount of turn before then just the very end of the flight. It does check up. So definitely this is like the Buzzz OS. So overly overstable mid-ranges are not a new concept, but the Swarm is new for Discraft. So let's go ahead and see how the Swarm fares against other overly overstable mid-ranges currently out on the market, like the Deflector from MVP and also the Justice from Dynamic Discs. Being a player with a slower arm, I'm not going to see as many of the differences between the three discs as a player who has a much faster arm, but they do seem to fly pretty identical, but there are still a few little nuances that I did notice. First, when thrown on a slight anhyzer, the Swarm actually did get a little bit more turn. The Deflector probably had the hardest finish, while the Justice, not having the harshest finish, it did check up sooner than the others, so it would fight out of anhyzer lines a little bit quicker than either of the others, but the Deflector definitely had the hardest finish, and I think the Swarm just kind of met right in the middle between the two. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, learned a little bit more about the Swarm. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. It really helps the channel, and I greatly appreciate all your support. Also, if you want to pick up a Swarm for yourself or just need new discs, please visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Use that code LEFTY to save yourself 10%. You're supporting a great company and also supporting the channel, and I appreciate it. Till the next one, keep banging chains.